Would you consider yourself a humble person? Humility. Most of us would agree that humility is a virtue, a quality that's worthwhile aspiring to. And for obvious reasons. A humble person will coexist and get along with others. An arrogant person has all kinds of trappings and vices that create conflict, even abuse. Humility includes yielding, flexibility, so important in relationships. And yet, why do we find it to be so rare? I have met many people who actually argued that humility is not, it's a nice concept in the books, theory, but it's not realistic. You have to have an ego, you have to fight for yourself, because if you don't protect yourself, who will? So let's dig a bit deeper. Why is humility such an important quality? Again, we all understand its value, but it's not so easy to access. Please join me in a very counterintuitive and surprising discovery about humility. Humility, when nothing is greater than something. Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we'll be speaking about humility, when nothing is greater than something. This program is dedicated by Daniel J. Arbus in loving memory of his mother, Ruth Arbus. Would you consider yourself a humble person? The quality of humility, most of us would agree, is a virtue. A humble person is deferential, easy to get along with, flexible. The antithesis of arrogance, narcissism, which of course leads to an inability to get along with coexistence, selfishness, greed, and even abuse. A humble person is usually a kinder person, compassionate person, empathy. It all comes together. And yet, look how hard it is for people to be humble. Why? If it's such a powerful virtue, why is it difficult to be humble? I even have people who've told me, it's very good for the books, it's nice for poetry, for music, for songs, for philosophies, but practically, humility doesn't serve any good purpose. You need to be strong, you need to fight for yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. Humble people get stepped over, taken advantage of, they're naive. I know it doesn't resonate with us because something about humility that does feel right, but it's a good question. How can you be humble and strong? You have to stand up for yourself. So let's dig deeper into what this thing humility is. So on a very basic level, we all can agree, as I said before, that humility definitely opens us up to having healthy relationships. Think of marriage. Think of any loving relationship. If you don't have humility on both ends, there'll be clashes. There won't be the ability to reconcile. There won't be the ability for people to defer to another. To broaden the point, humility also opens us up to getting beyond our own subjectivity. We're all subjective people. We have self-interest. And as a result, we have blind spots, prejudices, biases, including the most important, powerful one, which is self-love. Whereas humility allows you to step back and see there's something more than yourself. It allows you to not be so absolutely sure. Maybe you're making a mistake. A humble person will be open to hearing another opinion, another perspective. Now, it's important to point out that healthy humility is not low self-esteem. Actually, in Hebrew, they're two very different words. Low self-esteem is someone who thinks they're worthless. Humility is not someone who thinks they're worthless. Humility means I may consider myself very valuable, but I always say that I am not a self-made person. It was given to me. It's a gift. And if someone else received the gift, they may have been more successful than I. In the Bible, we're told that Moses was the humblest man that ever walked on earth, but he was quite self-aware. He knew who he was. He knew his strengths. But his humility consisted of that he recognized that his strengths are not his own. And if someone else had those strengths, they may have accomplished more than he. Low self-esteem is someone who thinks they're worthless. They're a doormat. And sometimes even invite people mistreating them. A humble person will protect their interests. They'll just do it in a humble way. But there's something far deeper. And this is where we get into a counterintuitive, and I would say even surprising, perspective on this entire topic. Just to use an example, charity. We can all agree charity is the right thing to do. If you're blessed with more, it's the right thing to do is to share with others. Whether it's financial, whether it's time, whether it's energy, whether it's advice, experience. That's what charity is. But there, it's more about the person who's receiving it than yourself. That the right thing to do is to share with another and help them. What about what does it do to you? And that's a critical question. Because in truth, charity does for you more than it even does for the recipient. It massages the muscle called, we'll call it in Hebrew, chesed, kindness and love inside you. When you give love, the love within your very being, it's called a muscle. It's not a physical muscle, it's a spiritual muscle, an emotional muscle. Gets stronger. And the same thing with humility. Humility is not just what it does for others, but what it does for you. It's actually helping you appreciate a reality far beyond your own. So the real question is, what is reality? I go back to the challenge that I was presented, have been presented many times. Why is humility, it sounds so intuitive, sounds so natural. Why is humility indeed such a powerful thing? We live in a world of egos. Every material entity has its identity. Why would I give that up? Why would I defer? Yes, if there's a benefit, I gain something, so maybe I'll defer. But just humility in the name of humility? Look at the world around you. The mystical language in the Hasidic terms, it would be a yesh. It's a word called yesh. Yesh means, it's a very powerful word. It means an entity, but an entity that's filled with itself. Not necessarily purely arrogance, but just, I am who I am. I'm not a nobody. I'm an entity. I should be respected. I have my turf. I control my space, my time, and that's that. Yes, a little humility, fine. But most importantly, begins with me. Me. You can take it to the id of the Freudian id, the self, self-interest, self-pleasure. It all begins with the survival of the fittest. I need to exist. And that's the most dominating, that's the most powerful statement that existence declares. Every one of us does that. So why suddenly introduce, yes, a humility that keeps the ability for us to coexist, to appreciate each other, to have a conversation, We all benefit from cross-pollination. But it's all about, in the words of Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene. The selfish gene. The very gene is selfish. Because all it cares about is survival. That's the most important thing. And therefore the survival of the fittest. We'll agree it shouldn't spill over to the point where we hurt others. Well, in fact, if you go to Nietzsche and you go to some extreme ideologies, sometimes that is also part of the so-called arrangement, that those that are more powerful will indeed control those that are less powerful. But even if you don't go that far, the very idea that the self is the single most important thing, but that's all predicated on a principle that reality is what you see and what you feel and what you experience with your senses. If science has taught us anything today, we've come to learn that reality is not what we see. Size does not matter. You can have the most powerful physical brute strength, and one mutant cell can be more powerful than all of that. In other words, invisible forces, an atom, subatomic particles that are invisible to the naked eye, have more power than all the armies in the world. Because there are invisible forces at work that are not measured with our sensory tools, and are not measured by size or firepower. They're measured by a quality that's hard for us to really wrap our heads around, because we're so consumed, we're so seduced by our senses, so we measure everything in terms of those limited instruments that we have. So what is true reality? That self, that sense of self, my presence? Or is there a reality that is far beyond that we don't really grasp? So in Jewish mystical teachings, there's the concept of, I mentioned yesh, there's ayin. Yesh is the reality we're aware of. Ayin literally means nothingness, but it's not nothingness. It means a reality that we're not aware of. Which do you think is more real today? They say that 90% of all of existence is black matter or black energy, dark matter. You can't even see it. And you know how vast it is? We're talking about beyond numbers you can't even express. So what we know is not even a iota of what we don't know. And that's not meant to put us down. It's meant actually to open us up to greater expansive horizons. So if someone says, I live in my little cave, in a little valley, and my reality is what I see through my myopic vision. Someone say, well, come out of your cave and your valley. I want to show you something. So many of us may not want to get out of our comfort zone. But let's say out of curiosity we do. And we climb out of the little cave and we see there's a plateau. Oh, wow. There are other things that exist outside of my little world. Then you say, but you know what? We haven't finished. I want to show you something more. Come with me and climb up a small little hill. We go up on the hill and the horizons begin to expand. I could also see much farther. Wow, interesting. And let's go a little further. Let's go up on a mountain. And higher, top of Mount Everest. Let's go up on an airplane. Let's go to the moon and look at the earth. Each step opens you up. Wow, in my little cave, I didn't even know that all existed. Not only did I know what I didn't know, I didn't even know what I didn't know. And now I see it all. Now, what does that do to a person? You could say that humiliates you, is demoralizing. It's unnerving, disconcerting, disorienting. I'm using all the words. Because you thought your reality, you had it all figured out, and now you suddenly realize there's a whole other world. That's not how we see it. On the contrary. It's like someone who only read one little book their entire life, and then they start reading other books. Does that open you up, or does that close you? Of course it opens you up. You suddenly realize there's a much bigger reality. And you haven't disappeared. You're experiencing that. What you're experiencing is something deeper and higher than you and yourself that you look at in the mirror. In the mirror, you see a reflection of yourself. And now you're looking through a pane of glass, you're looking through a telescope or through a microscope, and so on, and you see other realities. And what do you come to realize? That those realities are much deeper and realer and greater than your own. So what is greater, your something? Or that nothing? Meaning nothing, not as a nothing that you didn't know about, or you still don't really know about. You just know this so vast. It's a critical point to think about. I always love this Chelm story. Chelm was this town in Poland where they say there were wise people in that town. But I guess their neighbors were resentful, so they created this whole folklore, the jokes of Chelm, as fools. And they're actually quite powerful psychological insights. You know, one of the classics that people know is someone's looking for his keys that he lost that night. And he can't find his keys. His neighbor comes by and says, let me help you search. Let's retrace the steps. Where'd you lose them? And the guy points 100 yards away. He says, so why are you looking for your keys here when you lost them there? He says, because here's where the light is shining. So this is used in psychological context where we often look at the problems where the light is shining, not where the real problem is. Because that's uncomfortable. So here's the story of the farmer from Chelm. So Chelm was a little town in Poland. And there was a farm. You can imagine if the whole Chelm was a little town, the farm was just a small little space, but it was his farm. He inherited from his parents, his grandparents. It's like his baby. So he knew every grain of sand. He was very proud of his farm. One day, he gets a visitor, a distant cousin from the United States of America, one of the biggest farms in Kansas. Thousands of acres. Okay, his cousin comes, he gives him a royal tour of his Chelm farm. Doesn't take that long, obviously. They sit down to dinner, and the Chelm farmer asks this big city farmer, so what do you think about my farm? He says, very nice and cute, but it's so tiny, your farm. The Chelm farmer is like insulted. Tiny? How big is your farm back in Kansas? Now he had no clue what Kansas looked like, what the United States looked like. So the big city farmer is looking for a point of context, point of reference. He says, well, my farm, it takes me all day to travel from one end of the farm to the other end. He thought that would give him context of how large that farm is. The Chelm farmer suddenly, his face turns empathetic, compassionate. He says to his cousin, the big city farmer, don't feel bad. I once had a tractor like that too. In his mind, he couldn't even fathom that size farm. So he's telling him it takes all day to travel with my tractor from one end of the farm to the next. It means the tractor must be faulty. And he remembered the old Shmata Jalopy that he had that took all day to crank up to go from here to here. He could not imagine that's what it means. It means it takes him all day simply because it's so large, the farm. Every one of us has our farm. That's the nature of prejudice, of bias, of subjectivity. If I were to ask you, are you closed-minded, narrow-minded, subjective? Most people would not say, oh yes, I'm narrow-minded, closed-minded, and subjective. Because part of subjectivity is it makes you think you're objective. Right? But that's not a malicious response. Just like the farmer, the Chelm farmer was not malicious. It's simply due to limited knowledge. If someone asks you how objective you are, you're as objective as your perspectives allow you. It all comes down to who you are, where you come from. I mentioned before, someone says, what does the horizon look like? If you're living in a valley, there's one answer. You're living in a plateau, there's another answer. On a small little hill, a third answer. top of a mountain, a fourth answer, and on top of Mount Everest, a fifth answer. And no one's lying. Everyone's speaking through their lens, through their perspective. What humility ultimately is not just a nice thing to be humble. That's beautiful. And all the value in that and the virtues is clear. It's actually appreciating reality for what it really is. Yes, you're an important person. Birth is God saying you matter, you're valued. But life does not begin with you and doesn't end with you. It's not all about you and your needs. There's a bigger reality that you are a speck of, you're a part of it. And when you recognize that, that's when you become indispensable, actually. So true humility is, you know what it does? It connects you to something far greater than yourself. Without that, okay, you can be a great person, talented, wealthy, powerful, but everything is limited. We live in a mortal world, and every mortal has limits. So you're as great as you are able to achieve. That's it, and then it ends. What humility does is saying, I'm part of something greater than myself. The something I am is only part of a nothing that is far beyond me. That's why it's nothing, is beyond. And by essentially suspending yourself, what we call bittul, by suspending yourself and recognizing that higher truth, then you become an extension of it. So it actually makes you greater when you connect by becoming humbled, by seeing yourself as nothing in the perspective of this bigger picture. That makes you the ultimate something, much greater than your ego would tell you to be. So humility is actually an expression of experiencing a higher reality. And then you are part of that higher reality. And that's the case for humility. Of course, in addition to the benefits that it provides in creating a more civil society, healthier relationships, a more honest relationships, not hurting or abusing others, because it's not all about you. But it's not just the negation of ego. Just like love is not just the absence of hate, and peace is not just the absence of war, humility is not just the absence of arrogance. It's actually a very powerful experience that allows you to experience something higher than yourself. And that's why you stand humbled, because you're recognizing the truth. And then you become an extension of that truth. And when you don't recognize the truth, as comfortable as you may be in your little cave, in your little farm, but you're not really experiencing reality. So your something is a very, very small little world, whereas the experiencing of something beyond your something allows you to become something far greater than you could ever be. So when I look at a humble person, truly humble, and we're talking about a person with self-confidence, not someone of low self-esteem, what I see is a person that is the greatest of all. You sit at a table and people having a conversation, and everyone has strong opinions and good opinions, and they present good arguments and a good case. And there's one person sitting quietly. So first, initially, most people would say, he has nothing to say. Maybe he doesn't even get what they're talking about. Maybe he's stupid. Later you discover he's the wisest one of all. And his silence should not be seen as surrender or as acquiescing or as weakness. His silence is his recognition. I don't need to state my opinion. And when you get his opinion, you realize it's better than all the other people's opinion. So who is stronger, the loud arguments or the silent one? I'm not saying all silence is in that case, is that category. But there is a silence that's stronger than words. There's a nothing that's greater than something. It's a recognition, the humble recognition of a true reality. And sometimes actually learning from everybody. Because if you have a very strong opinion, you could just think, I'm right, state my opinion, or not state it, and that's an I ignore. No, but you learn from everyone. You learn from people that you may even disagree with. That's why a good exercise is that when you have I'll brainstorm an idea. I do this very often with my team. Come up with a good idea. Hopefully it's a good idea. But that, I'll be the first to challenge it. I'll say, let's say we do the exact opposite of what we just came up with. I'll say, why are you saying that? You came up with this idea. Because you want to stretch it. That's what humility does. It actually stretches it. And you want to hear counter arguments because then you get a much more crystal clear picture. You may come back to the conclusion that you began with, or you may come back a lot better because you've reviewed other options. And then you know, I've explored other ways. It's not like I just went one way. So it gives you much more confidence because you've seen and you've explored the other possibilities. That is all makes for something far greater than just the original position. And there's so many other examples that this applies to. It's an extremely powerful lesson in life because it's not just about being a nice person or being a humble person, a kind person. It's about being a different type of person, a person that sees another reality. So next time you have a disagreement with your spouse or with someone else, and we hope it's a civil disagreement, think of it in terms of this is an opportunity for me to get beyond myself. Not just how am I going to win this argument, or how am I going to persuade the other person, or how am I going to manipulate them. No. Their disagreement or their other perspective is actually opening you up to see a farm that's not your own. Now, you still can present your case, but you've allowed yourself to see another perspective. And that makes you greater. Insecure people cannot handle that. Narcissists can't handle that because they want it to be their way, and that's the only thing that works for them. They don't understand even the value of opening yourself up to get out of your little cave. But the value is it opens you up to the truth. It opens you up to true reality. And that's why the higher you climb, the more you see. And the more you know that you don't, the more you realize how much you don't know. The ultimate knowledge is to know that you don't know, or to even know the unknowable. That's what really connects you to a true something. And that's why humility is when nothing is greater than something. In our world, we don't always appreciate that. We appreciate people who acquire things, ownership, control. They have a lot of money, a lot of possessions, many homes, many cars, many people they influence. It's a numbers game. But one based on quantity. Quality is a whole different story. You can know the price of everything and the value of nothing. You can read more and more about less and less, to quote the same witty writer. It's about appreciating what is true and what is real. And what is real is a lot more than just the price of something, the power, the control. It's much more than what the senses measure. It's discovering a true reality. And you come to realize that that reality is real, and ours is just the tip, the very, very small tip of the iceberg. And that makes you a far greater person, not less, more. This has been Simon Jacobson, meaningfullife.com. If you've enjoyed this, found it valuable, please, and meaningful, please share it with others. Please subscribe to this and our other offerings. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your comments. Always good to speak, always good to share. And let us all learn to grow from each other and see greater heights, reach greater heights, see more expanded horizons in our quest for this infinite journey into the higher truths and realities that we are all part of. Be well and be blessed.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.